The villagers called her foolish when she knelt beside the golden-eyed boy bleeding in the forest. Lyra knew what he was, what his bloodline meant. Every scar on her land whispered the story of his father's cruelty. The Alpha King Draven, whose armies had left her village in ashes 5 years ago, whose name mothers used to frighten children into obedience. Yet as her healing hands moved over the boy's wound, Lyra remembered her mother's words. A healer's gift belongs not to one pack, but to life itself. Even as she worked, she could feel the weight of 2 worlds upon her shoulders, her loyalty to her ravaged people and the sacred oath that guided her fingers now, saving this enemy child who might one day become like his father. The forest held its breath around them, ancient trees bearing silent witness to her transgression. She knew the law: never touch a wounded wolf that doesn't wear your pack's mark. To break it meant exile or death. But compassion had always been Lyra's greatest strength and most dangerous weakness. What she couldn't know was how this single act of mercy would shatter the foundations of everything she believed. That the boy's father, the Alpha King himself, would come for her with fire in his golden eyes and a claim that would change both their destinies forever. By sunset, they would call her traitor. By midnight, she would wear the mark of the man who had destroyed her world. And somewhere between hatred and healing, between vengeance and forgiveness, Lyra would discover that sometimes the most powerful magic lies not in mending flesh, but in the impossible bridges built between sworn enemies. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. Lyra's fingers trembled as she pressed them against the boy's fevered skin. The forest around them had fallen silent, as if even the birds and insects sensed the gravity of her transgression. Sweat beaded along her hairline despite the autumn chill. "Don't," she whispered to herself. "Just walk away." The boy couldn't be older than 16, his frame still caught between childhood and the man he would become. His eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, lips cracked and bleeding, but it was his scent that made her heart race with fear. Pine, mountain stone, and something distinctly feral. The unmistakable mark of Draven's pack. An enemy. The son of the Alpha who had burned her village to ash 5 years ago. Lyra glanced over her shoulder. The patrol would pass through this section of the forest soon. If they found her with him. The boy convulsed suddenly, a pained whimper escaping his throat. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage on his side, bright crimson against his pale skin. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Help me." Those 2 words shattered something inside her. 5 years of hatred, of mourning those she'd lost in the raids, of nightmares filled with flames and screams. None of it mattered in the face of a suffering child. "Damn it all," Lyra muttered, pulling her healer's satchel from her shoulder. "This will hurt, but I need to clean the wound." The boy nodded weakly, his golden eyes, just like his father's, she thought bitterly, fixing on her face with desperate hope. Her hands worked automatically, cleaning the jagged gash with water from her water skin, packing it with a poultice of yarrow and comfrey. The wound was deep, likely made by a hunter's trap. If left untreated, infection would claim him before the day ended. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to distract him as she stitched the wound closed. "Kai," he managed through gritted teeth. "I'm Lyra." She didn't know why she told him. Names were power. The name of the woman who defied pack law to help an enemy would be spoken with venom for generations to come, if she lived long enough for people to speak of her at all. "Why?" Kai asked, his eyes searching her face. "Why help me when you know what I am?" Lyra's hand stilled momentarily. "Because before I am anything else, before I am a member of the Silvercrest Pack, before I am a woman who lost her parents to your father's armies, I am a healer." She resumed her work, each stitch neat and precise. And healers don't get to choose who lives and who dies. "My father says your kind are weak," Kai whispered, the words slurring as the pain-relieving herbs she'd given him began to take effect. "That compassion is a luxury only the powerful can afford." A bitter laugh escaped her. "And yet here you are, alive because of that weakness." She tied off the final stitch. "Rest now. I'll stay until your fever breaks." She shouldn't. Every moment spent with the enemy increased the chance of discovery. But she couldn't leave him like this, vulnerable to predators or another spike in fever. As darkness settled over the forest, Lyra built a small, smokeless fire and prepared a broth from dried meat and wild onions. The night animals began their chorus, owls calling to one another across the canopy. Kai's fever broke just before dawn, his breathing deepening into the rhythm of natural sleep. Lyra touched her palm to his forehead, relieved to find his skin cool and dry. "You'll live," she murmured, gathering her supplies. "But you need to—" A twig snapped in the underbrush. Lyra froze, her heart thundering against her ribs. 3 men emerged from the shadows, their massive forms unmistakable even in the half-light. They wore the insignia of Dreven's royal guard, a snarling wolf's head embossed in silver. "Step away from the prince," the largest one commanded, his voice a low growl. Prince. Not just any son of the Alpha, but royalty. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "I was just—" Silence. The guard's eyes flashed dangerously. "Our trackers found his blood trail. We know what you've done." "She saved me," Kai protested weakly, struggling to sit up. "Felix, she—" "Quiet, young prince. Your father will hear of this." Felix's gaze never left Lyra, assessing her with cold calculation. "The healer will come with us." "No," Lyra managed, backing away. "I've done nothing wrong." Felix moved with inhuman speed, his hand closing around her throat before she could finish. "You've touched royal blood," he snarled. "Your life is forfeit." "Let her go," Kai ordered, his voice stronger now. "That's a command, Felix." The guard hesitated, his grip loosening slightly. "Your father will hear that she saved my life when your men lost my trail." Kai's golden eyes gleamed with unexpected authority. "Now let her go." Felix released her with obvious reluctance. Lyra staggered back, gasping for air. "Go," Kai told her softly. "They won't follow." She didn't wait for him to change his mind. Lyra snatched up her satchel and fled into the forest, her feet carrying her swiftly through the undergrowth she knew as well as the lines on her palm. It wasn't until she reached the edge of her village that she allowed herself to slow, her lungs burning with exertion. Dawn was breaking, golden light spilling over the eastern hills. She'd made it. She was safe, or so she thought. 3 days passed in a haze of normalcy. Lyra tended to her patients, a child with a fever, an elder with aching joints, a young woman carrying her first baby. No one knew of her encounter in the forest. No one suspected that she had touched the enemy, had saved the blood of the man who had destroyed so much. On the 4th day, the horns sounded. The village erupted into chaos. Children were rushed indoors. Men and women grabbed whatever weapons lay at hand. Lyra stood frozen in the doorway of her small cottage, watching as riders appeared on the horizon, their banners snapping in the wind. Black wolves on crimson fields, the royal standard of Alpha King Draven. "They're coming," whispered Maya, her closest friend, appearing at her side. "Why would they come here? We've paid our tribute. We've kept to our lands." Lyra's mouth went dry. She knew why. A sick certainty settled in her stomach like a stone. The riders thundered into the village square, a formation of 30 armed men surrounding a figure mounted on a massive black stallion. Lyra didn't need to see his face to know who led them. The power radiating from him was palpable, an invisible wave that made the air itself seem heavy. Alpha King Draven dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size. He was taller than any man in her village, broad-shouldered and imposing in black leather armor adorned with silver wolves. His dark hair was shot through with silver at the temples, and a neatly trimmed beard framed features that might have been handsome, if not for their utter coldness. But it was his eyes that held her paralyzed. Amber gold, like his son's, but harder, like precious metal hammered into weapons. "I seek the healer," his voice carried across the square, deep and commanding. "The woman who laid hands on my son." The village elder, Tomas, stepped forward, his white hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Your Majesty, we have several healers. Perhaps if you could—" "Don't play games with me, old man." Draven's patience visibly thinned. "Bring me the woman, or I'll burn this village to the ground like I did the last one that defied me." A collective shudder passed through the crowd. Lyra felt Maya's hand clutch her arm. "Don't," her friend whispered frantically. "Hide, run, anything." But Lyra knew there was no escape. Whatever came next, she couldn't bear more deaths on her conscience. "I am the one you seek," she called, stepping forward. The crowd parted before her, faces turning in shock and dismay. Whispers rippled through the gathering. "Traitor, fool, walking corpse." Draven's golden gaze locked onto hers, and the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Something flashed across his face. Recognition, surprise, and something darker she couldn't name. "You?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. Lyra lifted her chin, determined to face her death with dignity. "Yes, I found your son wounded in the forest. I treated his injury." "Seize her," Draven commanded, and 2 guards immediately flanked her, rough hands gripping her arms. "Wait," Maya cried, lunging forward. "Your Majesty! Please! She meant no harm!" One of the guards struck Maya, sending her sprawling to the ground. Rage flared in Lyra's chest, hot and sudden. "Touch her again!" she snarled at the guard. "And royal blood or not, I'll make you regret it." A surprised murmur rippled through the king's men. Threatening the royal guard was tantamount to suicide. But Draven merely raised an eyebrow, studying her with new interest. "Bring her," he ordered, turning back to his horse. Unharmed, the guards dragged her forward. Lyra caught one last glimpse of her village, of Maya's tearful face, of the cottage that had been her sanctuary, of the people she'd spent her life healing. Then she was lifted onto a horse behind one of the guards, and they were galloping away, the village shrinking into the distance. They rode for hours, crossing streams and meadows, climbing higher into the mountains where Draven's territory sprawled across the peaks. When they finally crested a rise, Lyra caught her first glimpse of the royal fortress, a massive stone structure built into the mountainside itself, towers reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. By the time they passed through the enormous iron gates, night was falling. Servants scurried to take the horses, guards stood at attention, and nobles in fine clothing watched with undisguised curiosity as she was marched through courtyards and corridors. Finally, they reached what could only be the throne room, a cavernous space dominated by a dais on which sat a throne carved from a single piece of black stone. Skulls of enormous wolves lined the walls, their empty eye sockets seeming to follow her movement. The guards forced her to her knees before the dais. Draven took his seat on the throne, looking down at her with unreadable eyes. "Do you know the penalty for touching royal blood without permission?" he asked, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. Lyra met his gaze steadily. "Death, I imagine." "Indeed." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "My son tells a different story, however. He claims you saved his life when you found him bleeding in the forest." "I did what any healer would do." "No," Draven countered, his voice hardening. "Any healer of the Silvercrest pack would have left my son to die, or killed him themselves. The question is, why didn't you?" Lyra hesitated. What answer could possibly satisfy this man? What words would save her life? "The truth," she decided, straightening her shoulders. "I don't believe children should suffer for the sins of their fathers." A ripple of shocked whispers spread through the court. To imply that the Alpha King had sinned, she might as well have signed her own death warrant. Draven's eyes narrowed dangerously. He rose from his throne and descended the steps until he stood directly before her. This close, his scent enveloped her, pine and stone, like his son, but with an undercurrent of smoke and something wild that made her pulse quicken. He reached down, gripping her chin between his fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You have courage, little healer," he murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "But courage alone won't save you here." Then he released her and turned to address the court. "This woman has touched royal blood," he announced. "By our laws, her life is mine to take." Lyra closed her eyes, waiting for the sentence to fall. "But she has also preserved royal blood," he continued, "and for that, she deserves a reward." Her eyes flew open in surprise. Draven turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "Tell me, healer, what would you have of me? Gold? Land? A position in my court?" "I want nothing from you," Lyra said, the words escaping before she could stop them, "except perhaps to return to my village." A smile curved his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm afraid that's the one thing I cannot grant. You see, I have other plans for you." He extended his hand, and one of his advisors rushed forward, placing a silver collar in his palm. Intricate runes were carved into its surface, glowing faintly in the torchlight. "You will serve as the royal healer," Draven declared, "bound to the crown for the remainder of your days." "No," Lyra whispered, understanding dawning. The collar was a binding device, a magical leash that would tether her to the royal family until her death. "Please, Father," the voice cut through the tension like a knife. All heads turned as Kai entered the chamber, still moving stiffly from his injury but standing tall. "Son," Draven acknowledged, his expression softening slightly. "You should be resting." "I won't rest while you condemn the woman who saved my life to servitude," Kai replied, his gaze flicking to Lyra. "She deserves better." Draven's jaw tightened. "She touched royal blood." By law, Kai interrupted. "She could be executed. Instead, you offer her a collar. Is that mercy, father? Or just another form of cruelty?" The silence in the hall was absolute. No one dared breathe as the Alpha King considered his son's words. Finally, Draven turned back to Lyra, something new flickering in his golden eyes. "Perhaps my son is right," he mused. "Perhaps there is another way." He reached down, offering her his hand. Confused, Lyra hesitantly placed her fingers in his palm. The moment their skin touched, a current seemed to run through her, hot and electric. Draven pulled her to her feet, his grip tightening as she swayed slightly. "I claim this woman," he announced, his voice ringing through the hall. "By midnight she will be my mate." The court erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted in outrage, guards shifted uncertainly, and Kai stared at his father in open-mouthed shock. But Lyra heard none of it. The world had narrowed to the sensation of Draven's hand around hers, and the impossible words he had just spoken. By midnight, the Alpha King had called her his mate. "This is madness!" Lyra hissed, as she was escorted through labyrinthine corridors, flanked by 2 silent female guards. "Your king has lost his mind." Neither woman responded, their expressions impassive as they guided her up a spiral staircase. Every nerve in Lyra's body screamed for her to run. But where would she go? The fortress was a maze of stone and iron, crawling with guards loyal to their alpha. Even if she managed to escape, the mountains themselves would kill her before she reached the valley. They arrived at an ornate door, carved with scenes of wolves running beneath a full moon. One guard pushed it open, revealing a chamber larger than Lyra's entire cottage. "The king requires your presence at dinner," the taller guard finally spoke, her voice clipped. "You will bathe, dress, and be ready when he summons you." "And if I refuse?" Lyra challenged, crossing her arms. The woman's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Then we'll bathe you ourselves. Your choice, healer." With that, they departed, the heavy door closing with a definitive thud. Lyra was alone, or as alone as one could be in an enemy fortress. She had no doubt guards remained posted outside. The chamber was luxurious beyond anything she'd ever seen. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in midnight blue silk. A fire crackled in a stone hearth larger than she was tall. Through an arched doorway, she glimpsed a copper bathtub already filled with steaming water. Her instinct was to reject everything: the bath, the implied finery, the entire charade. But beneath the layers of dirt and sweat from the journey, she felt grimy and vulnerable. Clean, at least, she might think more clearly. The water was scented with lavender, and something woodsy she couldn't identify. Despite herself, Lyra sank into its warmth with a sigh, letting it soothe her aching muscles. As she scrubbed away the journey's grime, her mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Why would Draven claim her as his mate? It made no sense. Alpha Kings took mates for political advantage, for bloodline strength, for power. She was a village healer with no special lineage, no political connections, nothing to offer a ruler except the fact that she'd saved his son. Was this truly his idea of a reward? Or was it some elaborate punishment, a way to keep her under his control, to watch her suffer as she was torn from everything she knew? "It doesn't matter," she told herself firmly. "Whatever game he's playing, I won't be his pawn." After her bath, she found clothing laid out on the bed, a gown of deep forest green with silver embroidery along the bodice and sleeves. It was beautiful, and exactly her size, which was unsettling in itself. How long had Draven been planning this? She ignored it, instead donning her own simple dress. It was wrinkled from the journey, but clean enough. If the Alpha King wanted to parade her before his court, he would have to accept her as she was. A knock at the door preceded the entrance of a young woman carrying a tray of food. "My lady, I've brought refreshment while you wait," she said, setting the tray on a small table by the window. Her eyes widened slightly at Lyra's attire, but she said nothing. "I'm not your lady," Lyra corrected gently. "Just a healer far from home." The girl, no more than 16, with wide brown eyes and auburn hair, lowered her gaze. "The king instructed us to address you as befits your new station." And what station is that exactly? His mate. The girl's voice dropped to a whisper. Though many in the court say it cannot be, that you're a witch who's ensnared him with some spell. Lyra couldn't help it. She laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. If I possessed such magic, don't you think I'd use it to free myself, rather than bind myself to the man who slaughtered half my village? The girl blanched. Please, my lady, such words are treason? Lyra finished for her. Add it to my list of crimes, then. Forgive her impertinence, came a new voice from the doorway. Servants often forget their place. Kai stood there, looking stronger than he had in the throne room. The color had returned to his face, and though he still moved with careful deliberation, his golden eyes were clear and alert. The servant girl dropped into a deep curtsy before scurrying from the room. Kai watched her go with a frown, before turning his attention to Lyra. You should be more careful with your words, he advised. These walls have ears. Does it matter? Lyra asked, gesturing around the opulent chamber. Your father has already decided my fate, hasn't he? Whether I'm to be mate or prisoner, the result is the same. Kai crossed to the window, looking out over the mountains now bathed in the fading light of sunset. You think you know him, he said quietly. You think you know us, but you don't. I know enough, Lyra countered, anger flaring. I know he led the armies that burned my village 5 years ago. I know children died screaming in those flames while your people hunted down anyone who tried to flee. War is never simple, Kai replied, turning to face her. There are always reasons, always justifications that make sense to those giving the orders, if not to those suffering the consequences. And what reason could possibly justify murdering innocents? Survival. The prince's voice hardened. 5 years ago, your alpha was stockpiling wolfsbane weapons, poison that targets our kind specifically. Our scouts confirmed it. The attacks were preemptive. Lyra shook her head in disbelief. That's a lie. Alpha Thorn would never... Wouldn't he? Kai interrupted. The man who executed 3 families for refusing to contribute to his protection fund? Who forced young wolves into his personal guard through threats to their parents? How would you know anything about our alpha? Because we had spies in your pack for years before the attacks, Kai admitted. We knew exactly what kind of monster ruled the Silvercrest. Lyra sank onto the edge of the bed, her certainties suddenly less solid than they had been moments before. She had never liked Thorn. Few in the village had, but she'd always believed the attacks were unprovoked, motivated by Draven's thirst for territory. Even if that were true, she said finally, it doesn't justify what happened to my people. Many who died had no love for Thorn either. No, Kai agreed softly. It doesn't justify it. Nothing could. He hesitated, then added, My father knows this better than anyone. Before Lyra could question him further, another knock sounded at the door. The same guard from earlier entered, her gaze sweeping critically over Lyra's simple dress. The king awaits you in the great hall, she announced. Prince Kai, your presence is also requested. Kai offered Lyra his arm, a gesture so formal it almost made her smile despite everything. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, allowing him to guide her from the room. One more thing, he murmured as they descended the staircase. Whatever else you may think of my father, know this. He has never taken anything, or anyone, he didn't intend to keep. The great hall blazed with the light of 1,000 candles. Long tables arranged in a horseshoe faced a raised dais, where Draven sat at the center of the high table. Musicians played softly in one corner, their melodies nearly drowned by the buzz of conversation, all of which died the moment Lyra entered on Kai's arm. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare. Nobles in rich velvets and silks, warriors with scars and tattoos, servants frozen in the act of serving, all fixed their attention on her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. She forced herself to keep her chin up, her spine straight, as Kai led her through the gauntlet of stairs toward the high table. Her simple dress, which had seemed a small act of defiance in the privacy of her chamber, now felt like a glaring statement amid the court's finery. Draven watched her approach, his expression unreadable. He had changed from his armor into a tunic of deep crimson embroidered with black and silver thread, the colors of his house. A silver circlet rested on his dark hair, the only outward symbol of his kingship. As they reached the dais, Kai guided her to the empty chair at Draven's right hand, the place traditionally reserved for the Alpha's mate. A murmur of shock rippled through the hall. Lyra hesitated, her heart racing. "Sit," Draven commanded, his voice pitched for her ears alone. It wasn't a request. She sat, careful to leave as much space between them as the chair allowed. Kai took his place at his father's left, casting her an encouraging glance. "You ignored the gown," Draven observed, his golden eyes flicking over her simple dress. "I prefer my own clothes," Lyra replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Even when they mark you as an outsider?" "Especially then," she countered. "I have no interest in pretending to be something I'm not." To her surprise, his lips curved into a small smile, honest to a fault, a rare quality in these halls. He raised his goblet, taking a slow sip of wine before adding, "But the next time you defy me, little healer, there will be consequences." The threat lingered between them as servants began bringing out platters of food, roasted meats, fruits glazed with honey, vegetables prepared in ways Lyra had never seen. In her village, such bounty would feed a family for a week. She ate sparingly, too conscious of the eyes still watching her, measuring her every move against some unknown standard. Draven, for his part, seemed completely at ease, conversing with Kai about pack matters while occasionally addressing remarks to nobles at nearby tables. It was as if he'd already forgotten her presence, until his hand suddenly covered hers where it rested on the table. Lyra nearly jumped at the contact, her skin tingling where he touched her. "You're trembling," he murmured, his fingers tightening slightly around hers. "I'm surrounded by enemies," she replied quietly. "Wouldn't you tremble? We're not all your enemies." His thumb traced a small circle on the inside of her wrist, a gesture both intimate and possessive. "Some might even become your allies given time." "And you?" Lyra dared to ask. "What are you to me, Alpha King?" His golden eyes darkened. "That depends entirely on you." Before she could respond, a commotion at the hall's entrance drew their attention. The guards were blocking someone. A woman, her voice rising in protest. "Let me pass. I have every right." Draven released Lyra's hand, his expression hardening. "Let her through," he called to the guards. The crowd parted to reveal a striking woman with flame-red hair and emerald eyes. She wore a gown of midnight blue that clung to her generous curves, and jewels glittered at her throat and wrists. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way, like the edge of a freshly honed blade. "Mira," Draven's voice was flat. "I don't recall inviting you to dinner." "Since when do I need an invitation, old friend?" Mira purred, ascending the dais with fluid grace, her gaze fixed on Lyra, cold and assessing. "So this is the village witch who's ensnared you. How quaint." "Lady Mira," Kai interjected, his tone carefully respectful. "Perhaps this isn't the time." "Hush, princeling," Mira cut him off, circling to stand behind Lyra's chair. "I'm simply curious about the woman who's apparently usurped my position." Lyra stiffened, understanding dawning. This woman had expected to be Draven's mate, had perhaps been promised the position. "You had no position to usurp," Draven stated coldly. "Our arrangement was political, nothing more. And this isn't?" Mira laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You expect the court to believe you've chosen a penniless healer from the enemy pack for love? Please, Draven. We've known each other too long for such lies." The hall had fallen silent again, every ear straining to catch the exchange. Lyra felt the weight of their attention like a physical pressure. "Lady Mira," she said, surprising herself as much as anyone. "I have no desire for your position, whatever it may be. If it's any consolation, I'm as displeased by this arrangement as you appear to be." Mira's emerald eyes widened fractionally before narrowing again. "How refreshingly honest," she said, a new note in her voice, something almost like respect. "But honesty won't keep you alive in these halls, girl. Remember that." With a final, meaningful glance at Draven, she swept from the dais and out of the hall. Conversation slowly resumed, though Lyra could feel speculation buzzing through the air like electricity before a storm. "You've made an enemy," Kai murmured, leaning slightly forward. "I've made many tonight, it seems," Lyra replied, suddenly exhausted by the intrigue surrounding her. Draven's expression was thoughtful as he studied her. "Mira is ambitious, not cruel," he said. "Still, you would do well to watch your back around her." "I would do well to return to my village," Lyra countered, "but that option seems to have been taken from me." "Some choices," Draven replied, "are made for us by fate rather than by our own desires." Before she could argue the point, he rose to his feet, silencing the hall once more. "My people," he addressed the gathering. his deep voice carrying to every corner. "Tonight, we honor the woman who saved my son's life at great risk to her own. Lyra of the Silvercrest Pack has demonstrated the courage and compassion worthy of our highest respect." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some agreeing, others clearly skeptical. "It is my decree," Draven continued, "that she be accepted among us not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as my intended mate. By the next full moon, we will be bonded in the sacred rites of our ancestors." "The full moon is 3 weeks away," Kai whispered to her. "He's giving you time." "Time for what?" Lyra wanted to ask, but Draven was already raising his goblet in a toast. "To new beginnings," he declared, his golden eyes finding hers across the rim of his cup. The court echoed the toast, hundreds of goblets lifting in unison. Lyra didn't move, her hands clenched in her lap. Draven set down his goblet and extended his hand to her. "Come," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "It's time we spoke privately." She hesitated, acutely aware of the watching crowd, before placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, as he led her from the dais. The nobles bowed as they passed, though Lyra caught more than one venomous glare directed her way. These people would never accept her. How could they, when she herself rejected everything this union represented? Draven guided her through the halls to a different part of the fortress, away from the chamber where she'd been taken earlier. They climbed a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever, until finally emerging onto the battlements high above the courtyard. The night spread before them, vast and star-filled. Mountains loomed on all sides, their peaks silver in the moonlight. The air was crisp, scented with pine and wood smoke. Draven released her hand, moving to the stone parapet. "You have questions," he said, his back to her. "Ask them." Lyra crossed her arms, suddenly cold in the mountain air. "Why are you doing this? The truth this time, not some pretty speech for your court." He turned to face her, his features thrown into sharp relief by the moonlight. "Because when my son described the healer who saved him, I knew it could only be you." "That makes no sense," Lyra protested. "We've never met before today, haven't we?" Draven's voice was soft, almost sad. 5 years ago, during the raids. A girl with eyes like storm clouds and hands that glowed with healing light. You pulled 3 children from a burning building while my soldiers looked on in awe. Lyra's breath caught. The memory crashed over her. Heat, smoke, the screams of trapped children. She'd used her healing gift in a way she never had before, channeling it to strengthen her limbs, to clear her lungs of smoke, to find the children in the chaos. "You were there?" she whispered, disbelieving. "I saw you carry the last child out moments before the roof collapsed. You should have died in those flames, but somehow you survived." Draven's golden eyes held hers. "I never forgot you. The healer with the courage of a warrior. You killed my people," Lyra said, the words torn from her throat. "You destroyed everything I loved." "Yes," he acknowledged, not looking away. "And I have lived with that blood on my hands every day since." "Then why claim me as your mate? Is this some twisted form of penance?" "No." Draven moved closer, until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "It's something far more dangerous." "What?" "Hope." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Hope that perhaps the hatred between our packs can end, that the next generation might know peace." Lyra shook her head, backing away. "You're asking me to forgive the unforgivable. I'm asking you to help me build something new from the ashes of our mistakes." Draven reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Lyra. I haven't earned it yet." The yet hung between them, heavy with implication. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. Draven's expression hardened. "Then you remain here as my prisoner rather than my mate. Either way, you will never return to your village." "Why?" Lyra demanded, anger flaring. "If this is truly about peace, why not let me go? Show goodwill rather than force." "Because I can't protect you there," he growled, suddenly fierce. "The moment you set foot in Silvercrest territory, Thorn will have you executed for treason. Or worse, use you as leverage against me." "Thorn is dead," Lyra said, confused. "He died in the raids." Draven's brow furrowed. "Thorn lives. He rules your pack with an iron fist even now." "No," Lyra insisted. "After the raids, Elder Thomas became our leader. He's guided us ever since. Thomas is Thorn's puppet. Draven countered. A figurehead to maintain the illusion of benevolent leadership while Thorn operates from the shadows. Lyra's mind raced, pieces falling into place. The heavy tributes that never seemed to improve village conditions. The young men and women who disappeared after speaking out against pack policies. The fear that still permeated their lives despite supposed peace. If what you say is true, she said slowly, then my people are still suffering under his rule. Yes, Draven's gaze was intent on her face, which is why I've been planning to move against him for months. But striking now would ignite another war. Unless you had a legitimate reason to intervene, Lyra finished for him, understanding dawning. Like protecting your mate's former pack. Draven inclined his head, neither confirming nor denying her conclusion. So I'm to be a political pawn after all, she said bitterly. A convenient excuse for your next conquest. You misunderstand. Draven's hands closed on her shoulders, his grip firm, but not painful. I don't seek conquest. I seek justice, for your people and mine. The union I propose would legitimize any intervention, yes, but it would also bind our packs in ways that might finally heal old wounds. Lyra searched his face, looking for deception, for the cold calculation she expected from a man who had orchestrated such destruction. Instead, she found intensity, determination, and something else. A vulnerability he seemed to be trying to conceal. You're asking me to trust you, she said, after everything you've done. I'm asking you to judge me by what I do now, not only by what I've done before. His thumbs traced small circles on her shoulders, the gesture oddly soothing. 3 weeks, Lyra. Give me 3 weeks to prove my intentions are genuine. The proposition hung in the air between them. Impossible and yet somehow inevitable. Lyra thought of her village, of Maya and the others who might still be suffering under Thorn's shadow. If there was even a chance she could help them? 3 weeks. She agreed finally. But I make no promises beyond that. Draven's expression softened, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Fair enough, little healer. His hand slid from her shoulders, one moving to cup the back of her neck in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Now, there's someone else you should meet. Before she could ask who, a massive shadow detached itself from the darkness of the stairwell. Lyra's heart lurched as a wolf the size of a small horse padded silently toward them, its coat silver-black in the moonlight, its eyes the same molten gold as Draven's. Don't be afraid, Draven murmured, his hand still steady on her neck. He won't harm you. The wolf approached, its movements fluid and deliberate. It circled them once before coming to stand before Lyra, so close she could feel its breath warm on her hands. This is my wolf, Draven explained, the other half of my soul. Among shifters, the wolf was sacred, the animal spirit that resided alongside the human one, separate yet inseparable. Most could partially shift, taking on aspects of their wolf while remaining primarily human. Only alphas could achieve a full separation, allowing their wolf to manifest as an independent entity while maintaining their human form. The wolf regarded her with uncanny intelligence, as if measuring her worth. Then, to Lyra's shock, it lowered its massive head and nudged her hand. He wants you to touch him, Draven said, surprise evident in his voice. That's unusual. He doesn't typically allow anyone but me to make contact. Hesitantly, Lyra raised her hand and placed it on the wolf's broad head. Its fur was softer than she expected, warm beneath her palm. The wolf leaned into her touch, a rumbling sound that might have been contentment emanating from its chest. He accepts you, Draven said softly, wonder and something like reverence in his tone. Do you understand what that means? Lyra shook her head, still in awe of the massive creature allowing her to stroke its head. It means, Draven continued, that perhaps this union isn't merely political after all. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, tilting her face toward his. Perhaps fate has plans for us that neither of us anticipated. His golden eyes held hers, filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and for a moment, she wasn't sure she would stop him. Then the wolf growled low, breaking the spell. Draven's head snapped up, his attention shifting to the stairwell. Someone's coming, he said, stepping slightly in front of Lyra in a protective gesture that surprised her. The wolf moved to flank them, its massive body coiled with tension. Seconds later, a guard appeared at the top of the stairs. His breathing labored from the climb. Your Majesty, he panted, dropping to one knee. Forgive the intrusion. but there's been an incident in the village. One of the Silvercrest healers has arrived at our gates, gravely injured. She claims she's here for Lady Lyra. Maya, Lyra gasped, her heart freezing in her chest. It has to be Maya. Draven's expression darkened. Bring her to the healing chambers immediately, he ordered the guard. Summon the royal physician. Yes, Your Majesty. The guard bowed again before disappearing down the stairs. Lyra was already moving, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. Draven caught her arm, halting her flight. Wait, he said, his voice gentler than she'd heard it before. I'll take you to her. Without warning, he scooped her into his arms. Lyra's protest died in her throat as the world blurred around them, Draven moving with supernatural speed through the fortress. His wolf kept pace, a shadow at their side. In moments, they reached the healing chambers, a series of rooms equipped with beds, herbs, and instruments for treating the ill and injured. In the central chamber, a small crowd had already gathered around a bed where a figure lay motionless. Maya! Lyra cried as Draven set her on her feet. She pushed through the onlookers to reach her friend's side. Maya lay pale and still, her blonde hair matted with blood, her face bruised almost beyond recognition. Her simple dress was torn and stained with dirt and more blood. Who did this? Lyra demanded, her hands already moving over Maya's injuries, assessing the damage. A broken arm, cracked ribs, internal bleeding, and something else. Something that made Lyra's healing sense recoil. Poison, she hissed. She's been poisoned. The royal physician, an older man with steel-gray hair and kind eyes, nodded grimly. Wolfsbane, he confirmed. A small dose, but enough to weaken her significantly. If she weren't human, it would have killed her already. I need willow bark, comfrey, yarrow, Lyra listed rapidly, her mind already cataloging the treatments needed, and milk thistle to counteract the poison. We have all of those, the physician assured her, gesturing to an assistant who hurried to gather the requested herbs. Maya's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on Lyra's face. Found you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Had to warn. Shh, save your strength, Lyra urged, taking her friend's hand. You're safe now. No, Maya managed, her fingers tightening weakly around Lyra's. None of us are safe. Thorn, he knows about the king's claim on you. He's furious, says you've betrayed us all. Lyra's gaze flew to Draven, who stood at the foot of the bed, his expression grim. He did this to you? She asked Maya, though she already knew the answer. Maya nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. Made an example of me. Said it was what happened to traitors and those who helped them. Her breath hitched in pain. The others? He's holding them hostage. Says if the king wants peace, he'll have to pay in blood. Thorn has taken hostages from your village? Draven's voice was dangerously quiet. The children, Maya confirmed, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. 12 of them. Says he'll kill one each day, until you both surrender to him. Lyra felt as if the ground had dropped from beneath her feet. The children, innocent, defenseless, pawns in a power struggle they couldn't understand. How did you escape? The physician asked gently, returning with the herbs Lyra had requested. Elder Thomas helped me, Maya said, her voice fading. He's the one who told me to find Lyra, to warn the king. Thorn killed him for it. A wave of grief crashed over Lyra. Tomas had been kind, wise, a father figure to many in the village after the raids had taken so many parents. Rest now, she told Maya, brushing damp hair from her friend's forehead. I'll prepare the medicines. As she worked, grinding herbs and preparing poultices with practiced efficiency, she was acutely aware of Draven watching her, his golden eyes tracking her every movement. The other healers deferred to her expertise, following her directions without question. When she had done all she could for Maya, Lyra finally turned to face Draven. His expression was thunderous, barely contained rage evident in the tight line of his jaw, the rigid set of his shoulders. This changes everything, she said quietly, so only he could hear. I have to go back. I have to help them. No. The word was final, absolute. You would be walking into a trap. Those are my people, Lyra insisted, anger flaring. Those children are now my responsibility as well, Draven cut her off. But charging in without a plan will only get them killed faster. So what do you propose? She challenged, stepping closer to him. That we wait while Thorn murders innocent children one by one? Draven's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising gentleness despite the fury in his eyes. "I propose we use every advantage at our disposal," he said, his voice low and intense, "including the one Thorn doesn't yet know about." "Which is?" "The mate bond." Draven's golden eyes locked with hers. "If we complete it now rather than waiting for the full moon, it will give us both increased strength, enhanced senses, advantages we'll need if we're to save your people." Lyra stared at him in shock. The mate bond was sacred, permanent, a joining of souls that could never be undone. Once established, it would bind her to Draven for the rest of her life. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I have never been more serious," he replied, his expression grave. "This isn't how I wanted it to happen, Lyra. But time is against us, and those children need every advantage we can give them." Lyra looked back at Maya, lying pale and broken on the bed. She thought of the children Thorn held hostage, of their terrified faces, of the village that had been her home. Then she turned back to Draven, the man who had destroyed her world once before, and who now offered her the power to save what remained of it. "When?" she asked simply. "Tonight," he replied, relief and something like pride flickering across his features. "Under the stars, as tradition demands." Lyra took a deep breath, steadying herself against the monumental choice she was about to make. "Tonight," she agreed, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a precipice with no way back. "But understand this, Alpha King. I do this for my people, not for you." Draven's lips curved into a slight smile, unexpected warmth in his golden eyes. "For now," he conceded, "that is enough." The ritual chamber stood carved directly into the mountain's heart, ancient and sacred. Moonlight streamed through an aperture in the rock ceiling, creating a perfect circle of silver on the stone floor. Runes older than the kingdom itself adorned the walls, their meanings lost to time, but their power still palpable in the air. Lyra stood at the chamber's threshold, her heart pounding against her ribs. She wore a simple white shift, her feet bare against the cold stone, her hair loose around her shoulders. The royal handmaidens had prepared her body with scented oils and whispered blessings, their hands gentle despite the fear in their eyes. No one believed this union would work. A village healer and an Alpha King, a conquered and a conqueror. Perhaps they were right to doubt. Yet here she stood, about to bind her soul to the man who had burned her world to ash. For the children, she reminded herself. For Maya. For her village. The chamber was empty save for Draven, who waited in the moonlight's center. Like her, he wore only simple white clothing, his feet bare, his dark hair unbound. Without his armor and finery, he seemed almost mortal, though the power radiating from him remained undeniable. "Come," he called softly, his voice echoing in the chamber's vastness. Lyra forced herself forward, each step deliberate, until she stood before him in the moonlight. This close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the faint silver scattered through his dark hair, the barely perceptible tremble in his outstretched hand. He was nervous, she realized with shock. The mighty Alpha King, uncertain. "Last chance to run," he murmured, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Would you let me?" she asked, genuinely curious. His golden eyes darkened. "No," he admitted, "but it would be memorable." Despite everything, Lyra found herself smiling. "I'm not running." "Then take my hand, little healer," he said, "and let us begin." She placed her palm against his, the contact sending a jolt of awareness through her body. His skin was warm, calloused from years of battle, strong enough to break her without effort, yet his touch remained gentle, almost reverent. Draven led her to the center of the moonlight circle and knelt, drawing her down to kneel facing him. Their joined hands he placed on the stone between them. "The mate bond is sacred," he began, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality that suggested ancient words passed down through generations. "It is life joined to life, soul joined to soul. Once forged, it cannot be broken save by death, and even then, the survivor carries the echo of the bond for all their days." Lyra swallowed hard, the finality of what they were undertaking settling over her like a mantle of stone. "I understand. Do you?" Draven's eyes held hers, searching. "Once this is done, there is no turning back. You will be mine as I will be yours. Your joys will be my joys. Your sorrows, my sorrows. Your enemies, my enemies. Your pack, my pack. My people," she whispered. "Will become my people," he confirmed, bound to my protection as surely as you are. Determination strengthened her resolve. For them, she could do this. For them, she would sacrifice her freedom, her future, everything except her heart, which she would guard as her last private possession. Begin, she said, steeling herself. Draven's free hand reached for a small ceremonial knife that lay beside them. With a swift, practiced motion, he sliced his palm, then hers. Blood welled, bright crimson in the moonlight, as he pressed their wounded hands together. Blood to blood, he intoned, the words seeming to vibrate in the air around them. Life to life. Heat spread from their joined hands, traveling up Lyra's arm and spreading throughout her body. It was unlike anything she had felt before. Not pain exactly, but an intensity that bordered on overwhelming. She gasped, her back arching as the sensation crested. Breathe through it, Draven advised, his own voice strained. Let it come. The heat transformed into something else, a presence in her mind, foreign yet familiar, brushing against her consciousness like a physical touch. Draven. She could feel him, his emotions washing over her in waves. Determination, concern, and beneath it all, a longing so profound it stole her breath. What is that? She whispered, though she already knew. Me, he answered simply. As I can feel you, your fear, your courage, your anger. A small smile touched his lips. Your stubborn defiance. This was more intimate than Lyra had anticipated, more invasive. Having him in her mind felt like being simultaneously clothed and naked, exposed and protected. She instinctively tried to withdraw, to shield her thoughts from his scrutiny. Don't fight it, Draven urged, his grip tightening on her hand. The bond cannot form if you resist. You're in my head, she protested, panic rising. And you're in mine, he countered. Look deeper, Lyra. See me as I truly am. Almost against her will, she let her awareness expand, following the tether that connected them. Suddenly she was drowning in his memories, his emotions, a lifetime of experiences crashing over her like ocean waves. She saw him as a young prince, shouldering responsibilities beyond his years after his father's untimely death. She felt his fierce love for his son, his pride in Kai's compassion and wisdom. She experienced his crushing guilt over the raids, the faces of the innocent haunting his dreams night after night, and she saw herself, through his eyes, first as the brave healer who had risked death to save children during the raids, then as the woman who had healed his son despite knowing who he was. In his mind, she glowed with an inner light, beautiful and fierce, and worthy of a respect he had shown to few others. It was too much. Tears streamed down Lyra's face as she tried to process the torrent of memories and emotions. Why? She managed to ask, the question encompassing everything she had witnessed. Because we are all more than our worst actions, Draven replied, his voice rough with emotion. And because sometimes redemption comes in forms we never expected. The moonlight around them intensified, bathing them in silver fire that didn't burn. The runes on the walls began to glow, pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats, which Lyra realized with a start had synchronized, beating as one. It's time, Draven said, releasing her hand. The claiming marks. This was the final, irrevocable step. Once they bore each other's marks, the bond would be complete, unbreakable. Draven leaned forward, his movement deliberate, giving her time to prepare herself. Your shoulder, he murmured. It will hurt less there. Lyra nodded, pulling aside her shift to expose the curve of her shoulder. Draven's eyes darkened at the gesture, his pupils dilating until only a thin ring of gold remained. Be still, he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. Then his teeth, sharper now, more wolf than human, sank into her flesh. Pain lanced through her, bright and clean, followed immediately by a wave of pleasure so intense it bordered on agony. Lyra cried out, her body arching, her hands clutching at Draven's shoulders as the sensation washed through her. It was fire and ice, pleasure and pain, death and rebirth, all at once. When he finally released her, licking the wound with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the fierce claiming, Lyra was trembling, her breathing uneven. Now you, Draven said, his voice deeper, rougher than before. He tilted his head, exposing the powerful column of his throat. Mark me as yours. The trust implicit in the gesture, an alpha offering his most vulnerable point to her teeth, was not lost on Lyra. She leaned forward, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence as instinct took over. Her teeth weren't as sharp as his, but they broke the skin nonetheless, the taste of his blood filling her mouth, copper, and something wild, like thunderstorms and forest loam. Draven groaned, his hands tightening on her waist, his body shuddering as the claiming took hold. When she pulled back, dizzy and overwhelmed, the moonlight around them pulsed once more, blindingly bright, before fading to its normal silver glow. The runes on the walls dimmed, their purpose fulfilled. It was done. They were mated. Lyra expected to feel different, diminished somehow, or fundamentally changed. Instead, she felt expanded, stronger, more aware of everything around her. The cool mountain air on her skin, the distant howl of wolves in the valley, the steady rhythm of Draven's heart beating in time with hers, and his presence in her mind, a warm weight that should have felt intrusive, but instead felt oddly comforting, like coming home after a long journey. "What now?" she asked, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. Draven reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek with gentle fingers. "Now," he said, "we save your people." The War Council convened before dawn. Maps covered the massive oak table, markers indicating Thorn's territory, the positions of his guards, the locations of potential hostages. Lyra stood at Draven's right hand, her new position as his mate acknowledged without question by the assembled warriors. The claiming mark on her shoulder throbbed beneath her clothing, a reminder of the irrevocable step they had taken. "Thorn expects us to attack from the north," Draven was saying, his finger tracing the main road that led to the Silvercrest village. "It's the most direct route, the one any logical commander would choose. So we don't use it," Kai concluded, studying the map with narrowed eyes. "Exactly." Draven pointed to a narrow pass through the mountains. "This route is treacherous, barely wide enough for 2 men to walk abreast. Thorn will have minimal guard stationed there, if any, because no one would be foolish enough to attempt it," one of the commanders muttered. "No one but us," Draven agreed, a grim smile playing on his lips. "A small force, 30 of our best warriors, will make the approach through the pass. Meanwhile, a larger contingent will create a diversion from the north." "And the children?" Lyra asked, her mind fixed on the 12 young hostages. "Do we know where he's keeping them?" "According to our scouts, they're being held in the old temple at the village center." Draven's expression darkened. "Thorn knows the sacred ground will prevent any direct attack. No wolf can shed blood on consecrated earth without consequences." Lyra felt a flicker of hope. "But humans can," she said, a plan forming in her mind. "Thorn wouldn't expect a human to pose a threat, especially not on sacred ground." "What are you suggesting?" Draven asked, though the gleam in his golden eyes suggested he already knew. "I go in alone," Lyra stated, straightening her shoulders. "While your forces engage Thorn's warriors, I slip into the temple and free the children." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the council members. Draven remained silent, his gaze intent on her face. "It's too dangerous," Kai protested. "Thorn will be expecting some attempt to rescue the hostages. He'll have guards, who won't consider me a threat," Lyra countered. "I'm human, a healer. In their eyes, little more than a servant." "You're also the king's mate," another commander pointed out. "Thorn will kill you on sight." "Not if he doesn't recognize me," Lyra replied. She turned to Draven, whose expression had grown thunderous. "Through the bond, you'll know exactly where I am. You can time your attack to coincide with the children's escape. And if you're captured," Draven's voice was dangerously quiet, "if Thorn realizes who you are before we can reach you," Lyra met his gaze steadily, "then you'll feel it through the bond, and you'll adapt your strategy accordingly." The room fell silent, as everyone watched the silent battle of wills between the Alpha King and his new mate. Lyra could feel Draven's resistance through their bond, his fierce desire to protect her warring with his strategic mind's recognition that her plan had merit. "I didn't take you as my mate to send you into danger alone," he said finally, his voice pitched for her ears only. "You took me as your mate to save my people," she reminded him. "This is how we do it." Something shifted in Draven's expression. Respect, reluctant pride, and beneath it all, fear for her safety. He cares, she realized with a jolt of surprise. Truly cares, beyond political alliances. "Very well," Draven conceded at last. "The healer's plan has merit. She will infiltrate the temple while our forces engage Thorn's warriors." His gaze swept the assembled commanders. But she will not go entirely alone. I want our 3 best stealth operatives to accompany her to the village perimeter. The trek through the mountain pass was treacherous. Narrow ledges barely wide enough for a foothold, loose stones that threatened to send them tumbling into ravines, winds that howled through the craggy peaks like hungry wolves. Lyra moved with a surety that surprised even herself, her body stronger and more agile since the bonding. She could feel Draven's presence in her mind, a constant warmth that guided her when the path seemed to disappear, that steadied her when the heights threatened to make her dizzy. By the time they reached the outskirts of the village, full darkness had fallen. Clouds covered the moon, providing additional cover as they crept past sparse guard posts. Most of Thorn's warriors had been drawn to the northern ridge by Draven's diversionary tactics. "The temple is there," Lyra whispered to the 3 stealth operatives accompanying her, pointing to a stone structure at the village center. "I can make it the rest of the way alone." The leader of the small team, a lean wolf named Sarah, shook her head. The king's orders were clear. "We get you as close as possible. Too many bodies increase the risk of detection," Lyra argued. "I can move more quietly on my own, and as a human I can enter the sacred ground without consequence." When Sarah still looked unconvinced, she added, "Trust me." Sarah finally nodded. "We'll create a diversion on the eastern side of the village," she conceded. "It should draw any remaining guards away from the temple. When you have the children, bring them here. We'll escort them to safety." Lyra nodded, then slipped away into the shadows. The village that had been her home for years felt different now, smaller somehow, and permeated with a tension she had never fully recognized before. She moved from shadow to shadow until she reached the temple steps. 2 guards stood at the entrance, looking bored rather than alert. As promised, a commotion erupted from the eastern edge of the village. Shouts, the clash of weapons, the howls of wolves engaging in combat. One of the guards raced toward the disturbance while the other remained, his posture stiffening. Lyra took a deep breath, then stepped into the open. She had smeared dirt on her face and clothes, disheveled her hair, and adopted the hunched posture of a servant. "Please," she called to the guard, injecting fear into her voice. "I need to check on the children. Alpha Thorn sent me to make sure they're fed." The guard frowned, suspicious. "I wasn't informed. It was a last-minute order," Lyra interrupted, approaching with her head bowed. With all the commotion, he wanted to ensure the hostages remain in good condition. Finally, the guard stepped aside. "Be quick about it," he growled. "And remember, sacred ground or not, I can still snap your neck if you try anything." Lyra ducked past him into the temple interior. She followed the sound of quiet weeping to a side chamber, her heart clenching at what she found. 12 children huddled together on the stone floor, ranging in age from perhaps 5 to 14. Their faces were dirty, their eyes wide with fear, but they appeared physically unharmed. "Lyra," one of the older girls whispered, disbelief and hope warring in her voice. "Shh," Lyra cautioned, quickly kneeling among them. "Yes, it's me. I've come to get you out." "But the guards are being handled," Lyra assured them. "Listen carefully. We need to move quickly and quietly. Can you do that?" Solemn nods answered her. These children had grown up in a world of fear. They understood the gravity of the situation. "Good." Lyra helped the youngest to their feet. "Now, when we get outside?" A slow, mocking applause cut through the chamber. Lyra froze as she turned to face the temple entrance. Alpha Thorn stood there, flanked by 4 warriors. He was a wiry man with shrewd eyes and a cruel mouth, his brown hair streaked with gray. "Touching," he drawled. "The prodigal healer returns to save the day." His gaze hardened. "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize you? That I wouldn't smell the stink of Draven's claim all over you?" Lyra pushed the children behind her. "Let them go," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "They're innocent." "No one in this village is innocent," Thorn snarled, stepping forward. "Especially not you, traitor, spreading your legs for the butcher who burned our homes." Anger flared in Lyra's chest. "You speak of butchery?" she challenged. "You who hoarded food while children starved? Who executed families for speaking against you?" Through the bond, she could feel Draven's alarm as he sensed her distress. He was coming for her, abandoning the diversion to race toward the temple, but he wouldn't make it in time. Thorn's face contorted with rage. "You dare judge me?" he hissed, stalking closer. "I protected this pack when no one else would." "You ruled through fear," Lyra countered. standing her ground despite the terror clawing at her throat. That's not protection. It's tyranny. Thorn's hand shot out, closing around her throat with bruising force. I should have killed you years ago, he growled, lifting her until her toes barely scraped the stone floor. When Draven finds your broken body, he'll forget all about peace. He'll attack in blind rage, and my warriors will be waiting. Black spots danced before Lyra's eyes as his grip tightened. Through the bond, she could feel Draven's fury, his desperation as he sensed her life ebbing. But beneath the fear and pain, something else stirred, the power that had always lived within her, the healing energy that had saved so many lives. With the last of her strength, Lyra placed her hand over Thorn's where it gripped her throat, but instead of healing, she channeled her energy in reverse. Where she usually knitted flesh together, she now pulled it apart. Where she usually soothed pain, she now intensified it. Thorn screamed, releasing her as his hand withered, the flesh desiccating before his eyes. He staggered back, clutching his ruined limb, his face contorted with shock and agony. "What have you done to me?" he gasped, staring at her with newfound fear. Lyra stood tall despite the bruises forming on her throat, her eyes glowing with a light that was neither human nor wolf. "What I should have done years ago," she replied, her voice raw but strong. "I've released these people from your tyranny." She turned to the warriors who stood frozen in shock. "Your alpha is defeated," she declared. "The true alpha of this pack is Draven, mate bonded to me, a daughter of the Silvercrest. Lay down your weapons, and no harm will come to you or yours." One by one, the warriors knelt, their heads bowed in submission. They had witnessed Thorn's defeat, had felt the power radiating from Lyra, a power now enhanced by her bond with one of the strongest alphas the territories had ever known. Thorn, clutching his withered hand, glared at her with hatred. "You think this changes anything? You're still a traitor. Your own people will never accept you." "Enough," a new voice commanded from the temple entrance. Draven stood there, his presence filling the ancient space like a physical force. His golden eyes blazed with fury as they took in the scene. Lyra with bruises darkening on her throat, Thorn with his ruined hand, the kneeling warriors, the frightened children huddled behind her. In 3 long strides, he crossed to Lyra's side, his hand gentle as it brushed her injured throat. Through the bond, she felt his concern, his relief that she was alive, his fierce pride in her strength. "Are you hurt elsewhere?" he asked, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Lyra shook her head. "The children," she whispered. "Get them to safety first." Draven nodded, then turned to face Thorn. The defeated alpha had backed against a column, his face pale with fear as he realized his miscalculation. "You took children hostage," Draven stated, his voice deadly quiet. "You threatened my mate. By pack law, your life is forfeit." "You can't kill me here," Thorn blustered, gesturing around the temple. "Sacred ground, remember? No wolf can shed blood." "I'm aware of the law," Draven cut him off, "which is why we won't be shedding your blood here. Guards, take him to the square. The people of this village deserve to witness his judgment." As Thorn was dragged away, Draven turned back to Lyra and the children. His expression softened as he knelt before the youngest, a little girl no more than 5, with tear-streaked cheeks and trembling lips. "Hello, little one," he said gently. All trace of the fearsome alpha vanished. "You've been very brave tonight. Would you like to go home to your parents now?" The girl nodded solemnly, her wide eyes fixed on his face. After a moment's hesitation, she reached out and touched his cheek with a tiny hand. "You're not scary," she declared with the certainty of childhood. "Lyra isn't scared of you, so I'm not either." Something in Draven's expression broke open, a vulnerability so profound it took Lyra's breath away. Through the bond, she felt his heart crack and reform, stronger, but forever changed by this child's simple acceptance. "I'm glad to hear it," he murmured, rising to his feet. He extended his hand to Lyra, who took it without hesitation. "Let's take these children home." Dawn broke over the Silvercrest village, bathing the square in golden light, as the people gathered to witness something none had thought possible: the formal unification of their pack with Draven's under the leadership of their own healer, now mate bonded to the Alpha King. Lyra stood beside Draven on the raised platform that had once been Thorn's place of judgment. The claiming mark on her shoulder was visible now, proudly displayed by the ceremonial dress she wore. silver and crimson, Draven's colors, but embroidered with the healing symbols of her former pack. "People of the Silver Crest," Draven addressed the gathering, his voice carrying to every corner of the square. "For too long, our packs have been divided by hatred and bloodshed. Today, that changes." The crowd shifted uneasily, their faces reflecting a mixture of hope and skepticism. Many still bore scars from the raids, both physical and emotional. "I know many of you remember the dark days," Draven continued, his tone somber. "The fires, the deaths, wounds that may never fully heal. I cannot undo the past, but we can, build a different future." He turned to Lyra, his golden eyes warm as he took her hand. "This woman, born of your pack, has taught me that strength lies not only in power, but in compassion, in healing rather than harming." Lyra squeezed his hand as she addressed her former packmates. "I know you have doubts," she acknowledged. "I had them too. But last night, I witnessed Alpha King Draven risk everything to save our children, to free us from Thorn's tyranny." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as parents clutched their returned children close, as families reunited after fearing the worst. "The bond between us is real," Lyra continued. "It offers a path forward, not forgetting the past, but refusing to let it dictate our future." From the crowd, Maya stepped forward, her injuries still visible but her eyes clear. "I stand with Lyra," she declared loudly. "I've seen both cruelty and kindness from wolves and humans alike. It's time we judge each other by our actions, not our birth packs." One by one, others joined her. The parents of the rescued children, elders who remembered the days before the hatred, young wolves tired of living in fear. "What of Thorn?" someone called. "What justice for his crimes?" Draven's expression hardened. "Thorn has been judged according to our oldest laws. For threatening the lives of children, for attempting to murder my mate, his punishment was exile. Alone, without pack, without territory." A satisfied murmur spread through the gathering. Exile for a wolf was often considered worse than death. The severing of all pack bonds, the isolation, the constant vulnerability. "There will be challenges ahead," Draven warned. "Old hatreds don't die easily, but together we will face them. Together we will build something new from the ashes of our mistakes." As the formal ceremony concluded, Lyra found herself surrounded by her former packmates. Maya embraced her tightly, tears streaking her bruised face. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. "I just didn't expect you'd bring an army and a mate bond with you." Lyra laughed, the sound surprising even herself. "Neither did I," she admitted. "Life takes unexpected turns." "Speaking of turns," Maya murmured, glancing toward Draven, who stood a short distance away. "He looks at you like you hung the moon and stars, you know." Heat crept into Lyra's cheeks. "The bond is more than just magic," Maya finished for her. "I see how you look at him too, when you think no one's watching." Before Lyra could protest, Draven appeared at her side, his hand settling at the small of her back. "The elders have agreed to a formal treaty," he told her, satisfaction evident in his voice, "binding both packs under our joint leadership." "Joint leadership?" Lyra repeated, surprised. Draven's lips curved into a smile. "Did you think I would rule your people without their consent? Without your wisdom to guide me?" His fingers traced the line of her jaw, gentle and possessive. "You are my mate, Lyra, my equal in all things." The sincerity in his golden eyes, the warmth flowing through their bond, left no room for doubt. This was no political maneuvering, no strategic alliance. This was something deeper. Something that had begun the moment he had seen her carry children from burning buildings 5 years ago. "There is one matter still unresolved," he murmured, his voice dropping to a register that sent shivers down her spine. "The final sealing of our bond." Lyra was acutely aware of Maya's knowing smile as she slipped away, leaving them in a small pocket of privacy amid the bustling square. "Tonight," Lyra promised, surprising herself with the anticipation in her voice, "when we return to the fortress." Draven's eyes darkened, his thumb brushing across her lower lip. "Why wait?" he asked, his gaze flicking to a cottage on the village outskirts. Her cottage, she realized with a start. "Tonight," Lyra repeated firmly, though she couldn't quite suppress her smile. "Some things are worth the wait, Alpha King." A growl rumbled in his chest, too quiet for anyone but her to hear. "You test my patience, little healer." "Good," she replied, feeling bold and light and strangely free, despite the binding that now joined them. "You've had your own way far too long." Draven laughed, the sound rich and genuine, drawing surprised glances from nearby villagers. The fearsome Alpha King, laughing in the sunlight, a sight few had witnessed before this day. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson that mirrored the colors of Draven's house. Lyra stood on the balcony of the fortress chamber that now belonged to both of them, watching as the last light faded into twilight. Behind her, the door opened, then closed with a soft click. She didn't need to turn to know it was Draven. She could feel his presence through the bond, warm and steadfast, and growing more familiar with each passing hour. "The village is secure," he said, stepping up beside her at the balcony's edge. "Kai will remain there with 50 of our best warriors until the integration is complete." "Your son is a good man," Lyra observed. "He has your strength, but a gentleness all his own. He takes after his mother in that regard," Draven replied, a hint of old sorrow coloring his voice. "She believed in mercy above all else." Lyra turned to face him fully, taking in the regal profile silhouetted against the darkening sky. "She would be proud of what you did today," she said softly, "of the peace you're building." Draven's golden eyes found hers, filled with an emotion too complex to name. "What we're building," he corrected, reaching out to trace the line of her jaw with gentle fingers. "I could not have done this alone, little healer." The tenderness in his touch, the warmth in his gaze. It should have frightened her, this intimacy with a man who had once been her enemy. Instead, it felt like pieces of a puzzle finally sliding into place, completing a picture she hadn't known was incomplete. "Are you afraid?" he asked, reading her expression with uncanny accuracy. "No," Lyra admitted, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Not anymore." Draven's smile was slow, predatory in a way that sent delicious shivers down her spine rather than fear. "Good," he murmured, his hand sliding to cup the back of her neck. "Because I've waited long enough to claim you fully, my mate." His lips found hers, gentle at first, then with growing hunger as she responded to his touch. Through the bond, their emotions mingled and amplified, desire feeding desire, need answering need, until Lyra couldn't tell where her feelings ended and his began. And as night fell completely, wrapping the mountains in velvet darkness, Alpha King Draven and his healer mate sealed their bond in the most ancient way of all, not with blood or magic this time, but with the joining of bodies and hearts that had once seemed destined only for enmity, now transformed into something neither had dared to dream possible. Love, born from the ashes of hatred. Strength, forged in the fires of adversity, and peace, at long last, for two packs that would become one under their joint protection. They had laughed as she helped the enemy's son. By midnight, the Alpha King had called her his mate. And by dawn, they had changed the fate of both their worlds forever.